Hello and welcome back to Oak 101, How to Make a Website. So far we've gone through the welcome task, which is familiarize yourself with using code. We've also had a brief introduction to HTML, so this is what our code looks like at the moment, and also our website. However, now we're going to move on to learning some CSS to try and make our website look a little bit prettier, improve the design so we have a colored background, we change the size of these images, change the font here, and generally just make this website more appealing. So over to lesson 2. The first thing to think about is, what does CSS stand for? It stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Now I can't explain exactly what that acronym means, but all you need to know for now is that CSS is the programming language we are going to be using to change the style of our website. Now there are 3 different ways of programming CSS: inline, internally, and externally. And I'm going to take you through each of these 3 different methods in turn to help you improve the appearance of your website. Okay, so first of all, let's try and add a colored background to our website using inline CSS. To do this, we are going to code inline our HTML tag, our body tag, because if we change the background of our body, because of course the body tag is encompassing all our other code, this means the background of our whole website will be the color that we define it as. To do this, we're going to type style equals, open quotation marks, background, colon, and then we're going to pick a color, and I'm just going to pick red for the time being. I'm going to save, I'm going to refresh, and there we go. We have a red background for our website. Now, let's say I also wanted to highlight the header, the H1. I can copy this in. I'm then going to put blue, save, and refresh, and now we have a blue background for our header. However, I'm going to delete this because we don't especially want this. And in fact, I'm going to change this background to cyan, which is a nice light bluish color. In fact, what would be even better if we actually changed cyan to light blue, like so. And we're going to add a semicolon after light blue, because that's the common practice when you're coding CSS, which means then we could put another attribute after this if we wanted to. Okay, saving, refreshing, there we go. Perfect. So now we have a nice light blue color for the background of our website, which has been coded in inline CSS. What we want to do now, though, is code this in internal CSS. To do this, we're going to, first of all, introduce the concept of commenting your code. To do this, we first of all open up the comment tags with an angular bracket, an exclamation mark, 2 hyphens, and then we close this with hyphen hyphen angular bracket. So if I was to type some text in here, if we save and refresh the page, we will see that this text is nowhere to be seen in our internet browser window. This is because this is very useful for humans when we're coding, because it means that this text here is not read by the computer at all. The computer just simply ignores it, so we can put whatever we want in these angular tags for our own interest, and the computer will completely ignore it and not stuff up our code. The reason why we're going to introduce this now is because we want to cut this out of here and put it in our comments for later use. Because now we're going to start coding CSS internally. So saving, refreshing, it's gone white. This may seem like a step back, but bear with a sec. To code CSS internally, we need to create some new tags. These are called style tags. This states that anything within these style tags is going to be CSS code. In fact, internal CSS code. Now, this next bit is perhaps the most complicated part of this lesson, but is also one of the most important. So make sure you follow this carefully. What we want to do is we want to assign some CSS code to this body tag. However, we want to do it here in an internal style sheet, but not actually inline this HTML tag itself. So we need some way of writing this background light blue tag inside these style tags, which then refers back to this body tag. How we do this is assigning a class to the body tag. We do this by writing class equals open quotation marks, and then we can write whatever we want our class to be called inside these quotation marks. And I'm just going to put pancake for my class. It can be literally anything, but I'm going to choose pancake. Now we go down to the style tags, and now we need to refer back to this pancake class, which has been assigned to the body HTML tag. How we do this is a full stop. I'm just going to delete this now, just so we get rid of it time being. So how we refer back to this class is we add a full stop, like this. We then write the class that we've already called, because the computer now knows that anything after this full stop is going to be the name of a class. And because we've only got one called pancake, it's now referring back to this pancake class. We then need to open a curly brackets, like so. And we do this by going Shift and then pressing the key next to the Enter. And then we type exactly what we've done before, background light blue, put it in here, save, refresh, and we've got our light blue background back. However, now we've coded this CSS internally instead of inline, so it's a little bit more advanced, and now we've learnt the whole concept of classes as well. Right, so after inline CSS and internal CSS, we now need to move on to external CSS, and now hopefully you'll see why we've gone through these three stages, because external CSS is a great deal easier to code and will help us keep our code in a lot more of an organized fashion so we can edit it and improve it as time goes on a great deal more efficiently. To do external CSS, hence the name, we need to create an external style sheet. So everything in between these tags here is actually an internal style sheet because it's internal to this HTML document. However, to create an external CSS file, we need to go File, New File, File, Save As, and we're going to call this one style.css. Inside the same folder as our index.html, our Facebook, Twitter, and Barack pictures. And click Save. So you've now got style.css. What we now want to do is to copy this exact code and put it over here. But we're not done yet, because if we actually delete this code, the internal style sheet, and I'm also going to delete this comment here because it's no longer needed, and we save both of these documents, we refresh, and once again, our nice light blue background has now vanished. What we need to do is link these two documents together. Having them in the same folder isn't enough. And we link them by typing some code into the head of our document. If you remember, in the last tutorial, I spoke about how the head of the HTML document is used to link in various bits of metadata or data about our website, which helps the computer construct our website, but all the information in this head tag is never really seen by a human apart from the things in this title tag, which refer to this tab up here. Right, so to link our HTML document to our external style sheet, so we can link our body class, which is pancake, to the external style sheet so we get our nice light blue background again, we need to add a link tag in here, like so. We then need to put some code in line with this HTML tag like this. href equals, commas, style.css. This is now linking it to our style.css document. We need to add a little bit more information so the computer knows exactly what we're doing. rel equals style sheet, and we need to put type equals text / CSS, like this. If we save and now refresh, we'll now see that we've linked this external style sheet with our HTML document. So now we can put all of our CSS code in here with a class which links to it, and it's a great deal easier to code than both inline and internally. Because what actually happens, if you're going to create a massive website, you quite often have extremely large style.css folders or CSS files, which can go to thousands of lines of code long. And if you're going to put this in the same HTML document as all your other code, it will just be extremely difficult to manage. Right, so we have given ourselves a nice background. Great. However, we still want to do something with this image here. So we're going to want to code some CSS code in this style.css, which then changes our image in the index.html document. To do this, we're going to add a class to our image, and we're going to call this one Barack face. It could again be anything. We're going to copy this over, Command C, go to our external style sheet, full stop, Command V to paste, open up the curly brackets, and now anything I type in here is going to refer to changing the appearance of this image. So we're going to give this a height, and I'm going to choose 50 pixels. There are various ways of measuring things when you're creating websites. However, I'm just going to be dealing with pixels in this course. So I put height as 50 pixels. However, this is a square, so I'm also going to need to do a width. But because it's a square, I could put width is 50 pixels. But just in case you had a rectangle, so you're actually scaling this properly, I'm going to put width auto. Now if I refresh, we can see we've now shrunk Barack's face down to this size here. Now we want to center this image in the middle of the page. To do this is going to require 3 lines of code. We need to put display, block, margin left, auto, margin right, auto, like this. Save and refresh. Barack's face has now gone to the center. Now a nice little finishing touch could be to make this square a nice circle. So we can go border, radius, 50%. There we go. Barack's face is now in a nice little circle. Now let's try and do something with this H1 tag here. The first thing I think we should do is change this font. I'm not a big fan of Times New Roman. It was probably quite good 20 years ago, but nowadays there's a great deal of better fonts available. To do this, we need to use something called Google Fonts. Now, search Google for Google Fonts, and should be the first result that comes up. Now you can pause this video and you can search for a font that you really like on here. So I'm actually going to use a font called Signica. I've already used this font before, so I know what it looks like, and it's going to suit my website very well. But once you've found your own font you want to use, you need to click this here, this arrow that points over to the right, which when hovered over it says Quick Use. Clicking on this, you're then presented with this screen, and you then get the option in step 1 to load in the different flavors of your font to your website. As you can see, the more I click, an increase in page loading time is noticed. And to be honest with this website, it won't matter too much because it's going to be very simple anyway. But it's advisable to try and keep in the green, but we're going to go into the yellow just for now. Keep step 2 the same, just going to have Latin characters. Going into 3, we need to copy this link code here into our website. So Command C to copy, and we're going to paste this into our head of the website. If you can remember previously, I stated that all the code in the head of our website is useful in actually constructing our website, but is never really visible to humans unless you're going to put a title into your website, such as here. So what we're doing here is we're loading in an external style sheet. Whereas before, the style sheet we created is actually on our computer, style.css, this one here is hosted by Google. In fact, we can follow this link here. If we copy this and then put this in as an address, we can actually see we've loaded up all the code which actually makes this font what it is. We could, if we wanted to, put all of this here into our style.css, and we would effectively be doing the same process. However, I just find it a lot easier to put this link in here, and I think you would agree with that as well. However, what we now need to do to make use of this external style sheet, the code that's in it, such as this here, let's get rid of this for now, is we now need to add a class to our h1. To do this, we need to put class, open quotation marks, and we can put any class we want inside these quotation marks. I'm going to put this as Fred, like this. Saving, we've now assigned a class called Fred to h1, and we now call this class by going into style.css, full stop, Fred, curly brackets, and now all the code that we put inside these curly brackets relates to this Fred class. What we now need to do is put font family, colon, and if we actually go back to Google Fonts a second, and I'll find the Signature font again, very quick. If we go down to step 4, we can see that this CSS code is actually provided by Google anyway. We just need to copy this here and then stick it into our CSS like this, without this font family because we've already typed it, of course, and without the extra semicolon there. Saving our CSS document and of course our index.html as well. We then go over to the About Barack, refresh, and we've now got a new font for our header. To make this look a little bit better though, I'm going to go color, I'm going to put white. Because this is, unfortunately, I'm British, unfortunately CSS was created by an American by the looks of it, or at least this part of it was. So we actually have to spell color without the U, because it's the lazy way of doing it. No offense intended to you Americans, of course. If we then save the style.css and refreshing the page, we then get a nice white headline. We can then do text, align, center, save, refresh, it will go to the center. And I think we also need to make that slightly bigger. So we're going to go font size 50 pixels. Here we go, slightly bigger as well. So we sorted out our H1 to a certain degree. Now let's move down the page and try and sort out these icons here. The first thing we're going to want to do is to add a link to these icons. Of course, when I stated that we're going to put these in the page, we were going to make it so when the user clicked on these respective icons, it would direct them to Barack's Facebook page and also Barack's Twitter page. This is going back to a little bit of HTML, but it's advanced HTML, which is why I've left it until this CSS tutorial. To create a link tag, which means a link which when a user clicks on an object, it then takes into another website, it's different to the link tag here. What we do here is we create an A tag, and we surround the object that we want to create a link as with the A tag like so. However, now we actually need to point this image to something. And we do this by typing href equals quotation marks, and then we put the www.etc.com link in here. Let's quickly find Barak's Facebook page. Here we go. Let's copy this link. I'm just going to paste it in here. Great. Refresh the page. You can see now that my internet browsers recognize that this picture is actually a link, which is why I've got this pointer cursor to signify to the user that something actually happens when you click on this. I click on the Facebook icon, and now we go to Barack Obama's Facebook page. Brilliant. Now let's do exactly the same with the Twitter. Symbol / Barack Obama. Copy that link there. Sometimes Twitter's quite slow actually when you go through it. Doing exactly the same as we did with the Facebook page. Here we go. Surrounding the Facebook image with the A tag, href equals, commas, paste in the Twitter link. It's gone to another line. Save. Here we go. Clicking on the Twitter will then take you to the Twitter page. They look remarkably similar, don't they? However, what we're noticing is that when we click on one of these icons, it's taken us directly to the website, but it's taken us away from our original website. That's very bad practice when you're creating the website, because why would you want to direct users from your own work? What we actually want to do is we want to open these links in a new tab. So a nice neat little trick to do this is to put target equals, commas, blank. If we copy this over to the Twitter, like so, save, refresh, you can now see that it opens the new link in a new tab, which then means that we have our original website still in the background, which then obviously highlights the importance of having a title for your website as well. The next thing we're going to want to do is to center these icons in the middle of the page. This is actually very difficult, but if you follow step by step, then you shouldn't get lost. First of all, we're going to need to add a class to each of these icons. I'll add this one as Twitter icon, and of course it then makes sense just to save the Facebook one as Facebook icon. Going to style.css, if we copy this here, curly brackets, curly brackets again, forgot the full stop there. I'm just going to go Twitter icon, such as there. Let's resize this. So we're going to go, if we look at this, this is 50 pixels. We did it as, so I reckon, 30, 25 pixels for the actual icons. So width, 25 pixels. Height, auto. Same here. Saving, and they haven't changed. Why haven't they changed? Very interesting. Because what we've actually done, this is completely my fault, is I put the class inside the link tag. I cut that and put it in the actual image tag. Cut, so I did Command X and then Command V. Save. There we go. Now let's try and center them. So we centered this image here by using these 3 lines of code. Let's try and do the same for each of these icons here, and we'll see what happens. This is what we get. What's happened is that they've gone onto separate lines. They have centered each other, but it's not what we want. The reason for this is because display block makes sure that that's the only object which will appear on this imaginary line which has been created in our website. We need to somehow get around this problem. How we're going to do this is we're going to introduce a new HTML tag called a div. Divs are perhaps the most useful HTML tag that you'll use when you get onto fairly advanced website building. This is what the tag looks like here. What divs are is they're basically just imaginary rectangles which you can draw on the page. For example, if we give this class as a div, we copy this class over to our style.css, create a class like so, and we put background as red. Nothing has happened because we haven't saved our index.html. Command S, refresh. You can see we've just created this imaginary rectangle in our website. Let's just go over that again. So we've got this div here, which encompasses both of these icons, like so. And by doing that, by giving the background color as red, this is then what we see on the website. Of course, if we got rid of this background red, the actual background red would actually vanish, but this doesn't mean the div has vanished. Okay, we're going to take away these 3 lines of code for each of these icons because they're evidently not working very well. Save, let's see what happens. So far, nothing has happened. But what if we stipulate that everything inside this div needs to actually center itself in the middle of the page? How we centered this in the middle of the page was text align center. Let's see if this works here. Like so. There we go. They've centered in the middle of the page. The last 2 things we're going to want to sort out on this website are the header, the H2, and also the map. We're going to go through this quite quickly because we're going to be following the same process we've already done. We're going to add a class to our H2, and we're going to call this header 2. I'm going to copy this over, put it in the style.css with a full stop, paste, curly brackets, and we're going to use the same font family as our H1. In it goes. And then we're also going to want to, let's say, font size. This is 50 pixels. Let's go 30 pixels. And we'll also do color white, like so. Let's save our index as well. Happens. That looks pretty good to me. Now let's try and make this map 100% width. We've already learned how to do width and height in our CSS, and it's exactly the same process here. However, we're going to add a new width measurement or height measurement, a percent. We're going to go width 100%. Save, refresh, and we've now got our map as 100% width of our website. So when we go outwards, we resize our browser window, the map also responds to that as well. One thing you will notice though is that we have this strange border around the edge of our website, like so. This brings us on to an interesting issue with different browsers, is that some browsers come installed or have pre-programmed presets as to how they load different websites. Google Chrome seems to have added about a 10 pixel border, or we're going to call this margin now, around the outside of our website, and other browsers such as Firefox or Internet Explorer or Safari may come with different presets as well. What we now need to do is we need to reset these presets back to 0 so we completely get rid of them. To do this, we need to go back to our body, because of course our body tag is encompassing all the other code on the website, and we need to reset the padding and the margin back to 0. So if we look back, we've assigned the class as pancake to body. So let's find our pancake class. We need to go margin 0, padding 0. Save, refresh. You can now see that the map has completely gone to the edge of the browser window, and it's really nice and flush. But what we will notice, although it's good to have our map flush to the side of the browser window, it really doesn't quite make sense to have the text really close to there either, or the profile picture. So we need to assign different margins to this text and also the profile picture. To do this, let's go back to our index.html, look at the class we have assigned to barak.png, Barak face, and we're now going to put a margin top of, let's say, 10 pixels. Refreshing, and it's pushed the profile picture down. Now we need to add a margin left to this h2. So our h2 class is header2. So let's go margin left 10 pixels as well, like this. Now let's sort out this spacing here. We've got a big space here, so that could be because our h1, which we have given the class as thread, has got a bit of a margin at the top. We go margin top 0 pixels. It's gone up there, and also there's a bit of a gap there, so we're going to go back to header 2. I'm going to go margin bottom, let's say 5 pixels. I think it's going to about 15 actually at the moment. Refresh, and then we've closed the gap even more. Okay, so we've basically sorted out this CSS of our website. We've got a colored background. We've got a nice circular image that's been downsized. We've got a nice colorful headline. We've got 2 icons now, which when you click will open up the different pages in a different tab. We've also got another header that's nice and white and a different font. And we've also got a nice scaled map such as this. We're now ready to move on to adding some tabs in the middle of the page using some JavaScript to really finish off this website so it'll be a publishable standard, so in the last lesson we can actually upload it onto the internet.